The call came in just as I was finishing my morning reports. 3 hikers missing for 5 days in the eastern section of Glacier National Park. My supervisor's voice had that tension we all know, the kind that says this probably wouldn't end well. "Rob, I need you to lead this one," Mark said, already sliding the preliminary report across my desk. They missed their pickup date, and a park visitor found their car still at the East Glacier trailhead. I nodded, already reading the document. Matthew Thompson, Brandon Cooper, and Jessica Peterson, all mid-20s, all marked as experienced hikers. Their planned route followed the Highland Trail for the first day before branching north toward Iceberg Lake, a challenging but not unreasonable 3-day circuit. "Any contact from emergency beacons?" I asked. "Nothing," Mark replied. "That's what's concerning. These weren't amateurs who forgot to check in. 15 years as a park ranger had taught me that experience doesn't make you invincible. Sometimes it just gives you the confidence to take risks no one should take." I stood up, tucking the report into my jacket pocket. "I'll take Johnson's team. We'll start at the trailhead and work forward." Mark nodded. "Resources are yours. Find them, Rob." The unspoken message hung between us. Find them, even if it's just to bring bodies home to their families. An hour later, I briefed my team of 6 rangers in the equipment room. We gathered our standard search gear, first aid kits, communication devices, extra supplies, and emergency shelter equipment. I laid out the map across the table, following the hikers' planned path with my finger. "We know they made it at least to this point," I said, tapping a spot where another hiker reported seeing them 5 days ago. "After that, we're looking at approximately 20 miles of trail, plus any potential detours they might have taken." I divided the team into pairs, assigning each to different segments of the trail. Radio check-ins every 30 minutes. We stay in contact at all times. The drive to the East Glacier trailhead took 40 minutes. The hiker's blue Subaru sat in the parking area with dust on it. We checked inside, nothing unusual, just camping equipment they hadn't taken with them, a few energy bar wrappers, and a park map with their route highlighted in green marker. We began our search, following the Highland Trail. The early sections showed typical foot traffic, with nothing to distinguish our missing hikers from other recent visitors. The weather was mild, perfect for hiking. 3 hours in, Johnson called over the radio. "Wilson, we found something, about 2 miles north of Eagle Pass, just off the main trail." "On my way," I responded, already changing direction. "Everyone else continue on your assigned routes." I reached Johnson and his partner Hansen 15 minutes later. They stood at the edge of a small clearing, their faces grim. "It's not good," Johnson said quietly. The clearing opened up as I pushed through some thick brush. What I saw stopped me cold. 2 bodies were sitting against a big pine tree across the clearing. Both men, completely naked with no clothes anywhere around. Even from 20 feet away, I could see the blue-white patches of severe frostbite all over their skin. But their faces made my stomach turn. Their eyes were hanging out of the sockets, dangling on their cheeks, only attached by the nerves. Their faces looked frozen in absolute horror. I moved closer carefully, using protocol to stay focused. "Call it in," I told Hansen. "We need the medical examiner and evidence team out here now." Making sure not to mess with any evidence, I looked around the clearing. The ground didn't show any signs of a struggle. No stuff scattered around, no blood, no marks showing the bodies had been dragged. Just 2 men sitting against a tree like they'd stopped to take a break. I knelt down to look for ID, but they had nothing on them. From the photos in the missing persons report, I could tell they were Matthew Thompson and Brandon Cooper. "What do you make of this?" Johnson asked, pointing at the ground around the bodies. I saw what had caught his attention. There were no footprints other than those made by the victims themselves. No signs of anyone else entering or leaving the clearing. "Could be animal attacks," Hansen suggested, referring to the eyes. I shook my head. Not with this positioning, and animals would have left tracks. The frost damage on their skin made no sense either. We'd had mild weather all week, with overnight lows never dropping below the mid-40s. When the medical examiner arrived, she shared my confusion. "I can't declare cause of death here," she said after her preliminary examination. "The frostbite is extensive, but there are no other obvious trauma signs beyond the eye injuries. And those appear to be self-inflicted." "Self-inflicted?" I repeated. She nodded grimly. "The tear patterns and fingernail marks suggest they pulled their own eyes out." That detail sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Time of death?" I asked. "Based on decomposition, I'd estimate 3 to 4 days ago, but I'll need the lab work to confirm." By then, the rest of my team had joined us, and we expanded our search for Jessica Peterson. We searched the surrounding area in expanding circles, but found no trace of her. No footprints, no personal items, nothing to show where she might have gone. As the afternoon was ending, I made the tough call to stop the search for Jessica until morning. With daylight fading and the rough area, continuing would put my team at unnecessary risk. Back at headquarters, I spread the case materials across my desk. Photos of the 3 hikers smiled up at me. I reviewed their backgrounds again. Matthew Thompson, 26, software engineer from Seattle. 5 years of hiking experience. Member of 3 different outdoor clubs. Brandon Cooper, 25, physical therapist from Portland. High school track athlete who had switched to hiking and climbing in college. Jessica Peterson, 24, graduate student in environmental science. Had completed the Pacific Crest Trail the previous summer. Nothing unusual stood out. No criminal records, no history of mental health issues, no recent life problems that might explain strange behavior. Their social media accounts showed them planning this trip weeks in advance, with detailed supply lists and route discussions. I was still at my desk when the medical examiner called 2 hours later. "I've got preliminary results," she said. "Both men died of extreme hypothermia." "Hypothermia?" I checked the weather reports again. "We've had temperatures in the 60s all week." "I know, it makes no sense, but their core body temperatures dropped so low that their organs shut down. It's like they were exposed to sub-zero temperatures for hours." "What about the eyes?" I asked. "Definitely removed while they were still alive," she confirmed. "And based on the tissue damage, I'd say it happened shortly before death." I thanked her and hung up, staring at the smiling faces in the photos. 2 experienced hikers dead from impossible cold, with their eyes torn out by their own hands. And somewhere out there, Jessica Peterson might be facing the same fate, if she hadn't already. What the hell had happened in that clearing? 3 days after finding the bodies, I was back in the field. The image of Matthew and Brandon sitting against that tree haunted me every time I closed my eyes. Their medical report sat in a folder on my desk. Cause of death: extreme hypothermia during 60-degree weather. And Jessica Peterson was still out there somewhere. I gathered a team of 8 rangers at dawn. The morning briefing was tense, everyone aware that with each passing day, our chances of finding Jessica alive diminished. I spread topographical maps across the hood of my truck, pointing to an area northeast of where we'd found the men. "We've covered most of the marked trails," I told them. "Today we focus on this ravine system. Based on their planned route and the point where we found the bodies, there's a chance they explored this area." The ravine wasn't on any tourist maps, too dangerous and inaccessible for casual hikers. But for experienced outdoor enthusiasts looking for adventure, it might have been tempting. "Stay in radio contact, teams of 2. If you find anything at all, call it in immediately." We hiked for 3 hours through increasingly rough terrain. The ravine itself was a steep walled corridor of rock, narrowing as we progressed. My partner had fallen behind to check something, so I moved ahead alone, looking at the walls of the ravine methodically. That's when I noticed it, a large boulder against the eastern wall. The rocks around it were gray and bare, but this one had a thick covering of dark green moss. The vegetation pattern seemed wrong. In this particular spot, with limited sunlight reaching the ravine floor, moss shouldn't have grown so abundantly. I approached it, running my hand over the damp surface. The boulder didn't quite match the wall it rested against. Testing a theory, I braced my shoulder against it and pushed. The rock moved slightly, revealing a dark space behind it. "Peterson!" I called out, using my partner's name. "I found something." When he caught up, I pointed to the gap. "There's a space behind this boulder. I think it might be a cave entrance." Together, we managed to push the boulder aside enough to confirm my suspicion. A narrow opening about 3 feet wide and 6 feet tall led into darkness. "Call it in," I told Peterson. "Tell them we found a potential search area and to send backup. I'm going to take a look." "You sure you don't want to wait?" he asked. I shook my head. If Jessica's in there, every minute counts. I clicked on my flashlight and radioed my position to the team before going into the darkness. The temperature change was sudden and extreme. The mild spring air gave way to a biting cold that made me zip my jacket all the way up. The deeper I went, the colder it became, until I could see my breath clouding in front of me. The cave twisted downward in a gentle slope. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, the sound bouncing off stone walls. My light beam caught icy formations on the walls that looked almost like frost, which made no sense given the season and the region's rock types. "Jessica?" I called, my voice bouncing back at me. "Jessica Peterson? Park Service." After about 50 yards, the narrow passage opened into a larger chamber, maybe 30 feet across. My flashlight moved over the area, catching on something against the far wall. A person, sitting motionless. I approached slowly, calling out again. "Jessica? I'm Rob Wilson with the Park Service. I'm here to help you." She didn't move. As I got closer, the details became clearer, and my stomach tightened. Jessica sat naked against the cave wall, her skin showing the same blue-white patches of frostbite I'd seen on Matthew and Brandon. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, fixed on the wall across from her. "Jessica?" I knelt in front of her, checking for signs of life. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, but I could see the slight movement of her chest as she breathed. She was alive, but completely unresponsive, catatonic. I shrugged off my jacket and draped it over her, then reached for my radio. "I found her. East Ravine Cave System. She's alive but in bad shape. Probable severe hypothermia. Need medical evacuation immediately." I turned back to Jessica. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay." Her position, her condition, it was too similar to how we'd found the men, except she was still alive, and her eyes were intact, though they were wide open and not blinking. I touched her shoulder gently. "Jessica, can you hear me?" The change happened right away. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes suddenly alert. Before I could react, she lunged forward with surprising strength, her hands reaching for my face. "No, no eyes!" she screamed, fingers clawing toward my eyes. I fell backward, trying to catch her wrists, but she was on top of me, scratching and grabbing with a strength that seemed impossible given her physical condition. Her nails raked across my face, and I felt the sting as they caught and tore the skin open. "Jessica, stop! I'm trying to help you." She didn't seem to hear me. I managed to roll, pinning her arms, but she continued to fight, her body trembling with cold and adrenaline. Blood dripped into my eye from the cut on my face, making it hard to see. I had no choice. I pulled the handcuffs from my belt and secured her wrists, then used a length of rope from my pack to bind her legs. She continued to thrash and scream incoherently, most of it about eyes and seeing. "I'm sorry," I told her, knowing she probably couldn't understand me. "I need to get you out of here." By the time I got her to the cave entrance, the backup team had arrived. Their shocked expressions mirrored what I had felt upon finding her. "Jesus, Rob, your face," Johnson said, reaching for the first aid kit. "I'm fine. She needs immediate medical attention." It took 4 of us to carry Jessica out of the ravine, her body still fighting against the restraints. The helicopter was waiting in a clearing a mile away. As the medical team loaded her, one of them pulled me aside. "What happened in there?" he asked, looking at the blood still dripping down my face. "She attacked me when I tried to help her," I explained. "She's in some kind of psychotic state." The paramedic nodded grimly. "Her core temperature is dangerously low. She should be dead. I don't understand how she's still alive." I didn't understand any of it. the mysterious cold in the cave, the frostbite on all 3 hikers during mild weather, the strange behavior of Jessica, and the horrific deaths of her friends. "You need stitches," the paramedic added, examining my face. "That's a deep gash." I nodded, finally feeling the full sting of the wound now that the adrenaline was wearing off. As they finished securing Jessica for transport, I noticed her eyes, still wide open, unblinking, darting back and forth as if searching for something. At the hospital, they took Jessica to the intensive care unit while a doctor put 12 stitches in my face. The wound ran from my right temple down across my cheek, narrowly missing my eye. "You're lucky," the doctor said as he worked. "Half an inch higher, and you might have lost the eye." I waited until they finished treating Jessica before speaking to her medical team. The lead doctor looked troubled as he flipped through her chart. "Her condition is unlike anything I've seen," he admitted. "The frostbite damage is extensive, consistent with prolonged exposure to sub-zero temperatures. But the cave you found her in couldn't have been that cold." "It was unusually cold," I said, "but nowhere near freezing." He shook his head. "Her core temperature upon arrival was 82 degrees. That's incompatible with consciousness, let alone the strength you described. Patients with hypothermia that severe are typically comatose." "What about her mental state?" "Acute psychosis, possibly triggered by extreme trauma. We've sedated her for now, but she'll need to be transferred to a psychiatric facility once she's stabilized." I stood by the window of Jessica's room, watching her chest rise and fall under the pile of blankets. Her eyes stayed open, even while she was sedated. It reminded me too much of Matthew and Brandon, with their empty eye sockets, staring at nothing. What had happened to these 3 hikers? What had they found in that cave that made 2 of them tear out their own eyes and left Jessica like this? And why was the cave so cold? None of it made sense. But as I touched the fresh stitches on my face, I knew something really bad had happened in Glacier National Park, something I couldn't explain yet. A week had passed since finding Jessica Peterson in that frozen cave. The gash on my face had started to heal, though the doctor warned it would leave a permanent scar. 12 stitches held the wound together, a constant reminder of Jessica's desperate attack as I'd tried to rescue her. Mountain View Psychiatric Hospital was tucked against the foothills, about 40 minutes from park headquarters. The facility specialized in trauma cases. I'd called daily for updates, receiving the same concerning reports. She remained unresponsive, refused to speak, and required sedation for basic care. Her eyes never close. The lead psychiatrist, Dr. Mercer, had told me during our last phone conversation. "Not even when she sleeps, we've never seen anything like it." I signed in at the reception desk, clipping the visitor badge to my jacket. The spring sun had warmed the morning, but inside the hospital the air conditioning made it really cold. A nurse took me through a series of locked doors until we reached the secure wing. "She hasn't shown any improvement," the nurse said, stopping outside room 214. "But Dr. Mercer thought your visit might help since you were the one who found her." "Has she spoken at all?" I asked. The nurse shook her head. "Not a word. We have to sedate her twice daily just to administer care and nutrition. Otherwise, she becomes combative." Jessica's room was sparse but comfortable. A hospital bed with soft restraints currently unfastened, a small window with reinforced glass, and a chair for visitors. Jessica sat on the bed, wearing standard hospital clothes, her back perfectly straight against the headboard. Just as reported, her eyes remained wide open, unblinking, staring at the wall across from her. The nurse checked Jessica's vitals, made a note on her chart, and left us alone, promising to return in 20 minutes. I approached slowly, remembering our last encounter. The scratches on my face hurt again at the memory. "Jessica, it's Rob Wilson from the Park Service. I found you in the cave last week." No response, not even a sign of recognition. Her skin had improved somewhat from the frostbitten state I'd found her in, but still looked really pale. Her eyes, though physically undamaged, held a vacant stare that made my skin crawl. I sat in the visitor's chair, keeping a cautious distance. "I wanted to see how you're doing, and to ask you about what happened. if you feel up to talking about it." Nothing. Just the steady rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. I continued anyway, filling the uncomfortable silence. "We found Matthew and Brandon 3 days before I found you. I'm sorry about your friends. The medical examiner couldn't explain what happened to them, or to you." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Jessica, anything you can tell me might help make sense of this. Help me understand what happened in that cave." For 15 minutes I talked. I told her about the search efforts, about finding the cave, about my confusion regarding the extreme cold and the hypothermia that should have killed her. Throughout it all, she remained completely unresponsive, her eyes fixed on that same spot on the wall. I sighed, standing up. This had been a waste of time. Whatever Jessica had experienced had broken her mind. I doubted she would ever. The air in the room suddenly changed. At first I thought the air conditioning had kicked into overdrive, but this was different. The temperature dropped so fast I could feel it on my skin, like stepping into a freezer. My breath fogged in front of my face. I spun around, looking for the source of the cold, when Jessica's voice stopped me cold. "It has eyes. Only eyes." Her words came out in a whisper, cracked and dry from disuse. She turned her head toward me, her gaze now locked on mine with frightening intensity. "Jessica?" I moved back to the chair, trying to hide my shock. "Can you hear me?"
"It watches, always watching." Her voice strengthened slightly. No face, no mouth, just eyes, glowing eyes. I reached for the call button, but she shook her head violently. "No, listen, not much time." The desperate urgency in her voice made me pause. "I'm listening." Jessica's hands clutched at the bedsheets, knuckles white. "We found the cave 3 days into our hike. Matt wanted to explore it. So cold inside, unnaturally cold. Then we saw it." "Saw what?" I asked, trying to keep her talking. "A creature, standing in the darkness. No features except those eyes. Hypnotic. Couldn't look away." She shuddered. "It got inside our heads. Started talking without a mouth. Said awful things. Made Matt and Brandon. Made them." She couldn't finish the sentence. Her whole body trembled now, but her eyes remained fixed on mine, still not blinking. "They clawed out their own eyes," I finished for her, remembering the medical examiner's report. Jessica nodded. "It made them do it. They couldn't stop themselves. Said they had to. That if they could see it, it could see into them." The temperature in the room continued to drop. I could see ice crystals forming on the window now. "What about you?" I asked. "Why didn't you?" "It told me to close my eyes," she whispered. "Said if I closed them even for a second it would take me. So I didn't. I haven't. Not once. Even when it froze the air around us. Even when Matt and Brandon died. I kept my eyes open." My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. This had to be a delusion, a story her traumatized mind had created to explain what happened. "Jessica, you're safe now. Whatever happened in that cave." "It saw you." Her voice rose, urgent and terrified. "When you found me, it was there, watching from behind me. You didn't see it, but it saw you." I got a shiver that had nothing to do with how cold the room was. I remembered the cave, the weird cold, the feeling that something wasn't right. Had I missed something while I was there? "It spreads through the eyes," Jessica continued, her words coming faster now. "Eye contact. That's how it gets you. That's how it makes you do things. That's why I attacked you. I was trying to save you. If you can't see, it can't control you." The ice on the window had spread, covering the entire pane now. My hands had gone numb with cold. "Jessica, what is this thing? What does it want?" Her face twisted with fear. "I don't know what it is. Something very old. Something that feeds on fear and pain. It kept Matt and Brandon alive for hours after they..." She swallowed hard. "It wanted me to watch. Wanted me to close my eyes so it could take me too. But I didn't. I won't." The door to the room burst open. 2 nurses and an orderly rushed in, their faces showing alarm. "What's happening in here?" the lead nurse demanded, moving quickly to Jessica's side. She turned to me accusingly. "What did you say to her?"
I opened my mouth to respond, but Jessica started screaming. It's coming for him. Don't let it get your eyes, don't let it get your eyes. Her body thrashed wildly as the medical staff tried to restrain her. One nurse prepared a syringe while the others secured her arms. You need to leave now, the orderly told me firmly, positioning himself between Jessica and me. I backed toward the door, watching as they sedated her. Her screams gradually subsided, but her eyes remained wide open, tracking me as I left the room. In the hallway, Dr. Mercer approached me, looking concerned. What happened in there? The temperature monitoring system showed a 15-degree drop in her room. I shook my head, struggling to process what had just happened. She started talking about what happened in the cave, about something with eyes that made her friends tear out their own. Dr. Mercer sighed. Traumatic psychosis can show up as really vivid delusions. The brain makes up explanations for experiences too horrible to process directly. But the temperature drop, likely a malfunction in the climate control system. I'll have maintenance check it. He walked with me toward the exit. I'm sorry your visit triggered such a severe episode. It might be best if you don't return for a while. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my truck, trying to make sense of Jessica's story. A creature with only eyes that could control minds? That created freezing cold? That made people mutilate themselves? It had to be delusions. Yet certain details bothered me. The consistent hypothermia in all 3 victims during mild weather. The strange cold in the cave, and now in her hospital room. The way Matthew and Brandon had died, eyes torn out by their own hands, their bodies showing impossible levels of frostbite. And something else. A detail from the cave that I'd forgotten until now. When I'd found Jessica, had there been something else in the shadows behind her? A movement? A presence I'd noticed but not really thought about? I started my truck, pushing these thoughts away. Jessica's mind had created a monster to explain a tragic accident or the actions of a human predator. That had to be it. People don't tear out their own eyes because of some eyeball creature. Cold doesn't appear from nowhere. But as I pulled out of the hospital parking lot, the memory of ice forming on that window stuck in my mind, along with Jessica's final warning, don't let it get your eyes. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled out of the Mountain View Psychiatric Hospital parking lot, my head swimming with Jessica's wild story. But certain details nagged at me, refusing to be filed away so neatly. The consistent hypothermia in all 3 victims during mild spring weather. The way Matthew and Brandon had died, eyes torn out by their own hands, their bodies showing impossible levels of frostbite. The temperature drop in Jessica's hospital room, the ice forming on her window as she spoke. I touched the stitches on my face, the wound still tender beneath my fingers. 12 stitches from temple to cheek, a permanent reminder of Jessica's desperate attack. Had she really been trying to save me as she claimed? The thought seemed absurd. The road stretched ahead, winding through pine-covered hills as I headed back toward park headquarters. Traffic was light this time of day. I turned on the radio, hoping music would drown out the questions circling in my mind. It has eyes, only eyes. Jessica's words played on repeat in my head, drowning out the radio's chatter. I'd seen plenty of trauma cases in my career. Hikers who'd survived falls, hypothermia, animal attacks. Their stories sometimes contained hallucinations or gaps filled in by their minds. Jessica's account had to be her brain's attempt to make sense of something too horrible to process directly. That's what Dr. Mercer had said, and it made perfect sense. About 20 minutes into my drive, I noticed something odd with the truck's heating system. The air blowing from the vents felt way too warm even though it was set to low. I adjusted the dial, turning it down further. A minute later, I realized the issue wasn't the heater running too hot. The air outside the truck had gotten weirdly hot, like driving into some pocket of summer heat. Sweat formed on my forehead. Then, just as suddenly, the temperature plummeted. The change was so fast and extreme that I gasped. 1 second I was sweating. The next, I could see my breath fogging in front of my face. Frost patterns spread across the windshield, moving really quickly from the edges inward. I slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailing slightly before coming to a stop on the shoulder. My hands shook as I cranked the defrost to maximum. What the hell? The heater blew full blast, but instead of warm air, it pushed out frigid cold. The temperature inside the cab continued to drop until it felt like sitting in a walk-in freezer. My fingers began to sting with cold, even with my gloves on. That's when I felt it, a presence. Something was behind me. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it there. A voice that wasn't a voice whispered at the edges of my mind. Look, see me. A sudden, overwhelming urge seized me. My eyes burned. They needed to come out. They had to come out. My fingers twitched, then moved toward my face against my will. I fought the compulsion, grabbing the steering wheel with all my strength. My right hand pulled away, moving straight toward my eye. I grabbed my wrist with my left hand, straining against myself. No! I shouted into the empty truck. Stop! My fingernails hovered inches from my eye. The urge intensified, a bone-deep certainty that I needed to dig them out, that something terrible would happen if I didn't. My hand trembled with the effort of resistance. If you can see it, it can see into you. Jessica's words crashed through my mind, suddenly making terrible sense. With every ounce of willpower, I twisted away, throwing myself against the driver's side door. My head slammed against the window. The sharp pain cleared my thoughts momentarily. I fumbled for the door handle, fell out onto the gravel shoulder, and scrambled away from the truck. The cold followed me, surrounding me in a bubble of freezing air. My breath came in white puffs as I backed away, still fighting the urge to claw at my eyes. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the feeling vanished. The air warmed to normal spring temperatures. The compulsion faded, leaving me gasping and shaking on the roadside. A passing car slowed, the driver looking at me with concern. I waved them on, struggling to my feet and brushing gravel from my clothes. I leaned against my truck, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I fallen asleep at the wheel? Had some kind of seizure? No. It was exactly what Jessica had described. The cold, the compulsion, the voice without sound. In that moment, a memory surfaced. Something from the cave that I'd registered but couldn't recall until now. When I'd found Jessica sitting against that wall, there had been something else there. Not directly visible, but a presence in the shadows behind her. A pair of glowing points that I'd seen from the corner of my eye but had dismissed as reflections from my flashlight. Eyes, watching from the darkness. My hands shook as I pulled myself back into the truck. The windshield was clear now, no trace of the frost that had covered it minutes before. The heater blew warm air. Everything appeared normal. But I knew now. Jessica had told the truth. The thing that killed Matthew and Brandon, that had trapped Jessica in a state of perpetual terror, was real, and now it was after me. I sat there for several minutes, weighing my options. I could report what happened, but who would believe me? Mark would think I was having a stress reaction to finding the bodies. The medical staff would assume I was suffering from suggestible paranoia after talking with Jessica. At best, I'd get mandatory leave and a psych evaluation. At worst, I'd end up in the bed next to Jessica at Mountain View. No, I needed evidence. Something concrete that would prove this thing existed. I had to go back to the cave. Not immediately. I needed to prepare, gather equipment, think through what I was dealing with. But I would return to that ravine and find whatever was living in the darkness. Find it and destroy it before it could do to anyone else what it had done to those hikers. I started the engine, checking the temperature gauge. Normal. The heater worked properly. No sign of the supernatural cold that had enveloped me minutes before. As I pulled back onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror to check for traffic. 2 glowing points reflected back at me. Not headlights, but something closer, inside the truck. They were in the darkness of the back seat for just a second before vanishing. I jerked my head around, looking through the empty back seat, then returned my eyes to the road, hands gripping the wheel with renewed intensity. The rest of the drive passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the certainty that I was being watched, even as I told myself it was just my imagination, just the power of suggestion from Jessica's story. But deep down I knew better. I had seen those eyes and they had seen me.